Hello, this is QTV, the Gambia's first private TV station, and we're broadcasting from our studios here on Kairaba Avenue. My name is Aliou Cisse, and this is your weekly State of Affairs program. Well, in 2021, the President of the Republic, President Adama Barrow, assented to the Petroleum Commission Act, which was passed by the National Assembly. And since then, I believe a lot has been happening behind the scene. Well, joining me this week to discuss the mandate of the Commission and what the Commission has been doing is Mr. Jere Barrow, who is the Director General of the Petroleum Commission. Mr. Barrow, good to have you on the program.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Cisse, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
To start with, former Minister of Petroleum, Fafa Sanyang, took this bill to Parliament for enactment. It was successful and assented to by the President. Could you start by telling us what exactly is the mandate of this commission?
Petroleum Commission, okay. The Petroleum Commission is the regulatory body for upstream and midstream petroleum activities. Yeah, when I say upstream, I mean activities relating to exploration, development, and production. When I say midstream, I mean activities relating to the transportation, storage, and to some extent, refining of, petroleum resources. The petroleum sector generally is divided into three units: upstream, midstream, and downstream.
Okay.
Downstream predominantly entails the, part of the refining, the retailing, the marketing, the storage of petroleum products. Whereas petroleum upstream and midstream deals with the petroleum as a resource before it is processed to become a product. So our role is to regulate the upstream and midstream petroleum activities. In the Gambia, the downstream is regulated by the PURA, whereas upstream and midstream are regulated by the Petroleum Commission. On the other hand, you have the ministry responsible for policy of the whole, petroleum value chain, including upstream, midstream, and downstream.
And like you said, you're responsible for regulating the upstream, as you put it. What have you been doing in regulating? What have you been regulating?
Yeah, that is a good question. Let me take you back before 2021, that is the enactment of the Petroleum Commissions Act. Before then, Petroleum Commission existed as a department or a unit under the Ministry of Petroleum and Energy. And before then under the Ministry, under the Office of the President, and even before then, it used to be under the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Employment. Let me start from 2017 to date, because I came to the Petroleum Commission in 2015 December. And 2017, as you know, the change of government happened. Since then, a lot had happened in relation to the, exploration of petroleum in the Gambia. You will recall in 2018, FAR drilled the first exploration well in 40 years in the Gambia.
That's the Australian Oil and Gas Company.
Yeah, gas company. Okay. Before they drill, first they had to come onto the license. That license was originally signed to Kamak Energy, that later became Erin Energy. And in 2017, FAR farmed into that license, basically taking some of the shares in that license. FAR took 80% shares in the A2, A5 licenses. And this was in 2017. In 2018, Petronas, which is the Malaysian oil and gas company, also farmed into 40% of the shares into A2, A5 blocks that were held by the FAR or operated by FAR. In the same year, October, November, the first well was drilled in the Gambia for like 40 years. So since then, first giving you a summary, since then, they also they've drilled another well in 2021. in the interim, in 2019, BP was also granted a license. Okay. I mean, those activities or those operations were largely facilitated by the Petroleum Commission. Of course,
I like the fact that you mentioned FAR, you mentioned BP, you mentioned Petronas and all those ones. You'll get to them as to what followed after they were granted the license. But to start with, someone who is watching will be asking, do we have oil in this country?
Yeah, I mean, normally you only confirm, with certainty whether you have oil or not if you drill a well and find that there is, some oil in that well. Okay. Then you confirm that you have oil. But before then, it is, a perception based on knowledge. Okay. And if you ask me, I will tell you that I very strongly believe that we have oil. If we don't have oil, I would have to close our office and then leave.
Why are you convinced? Where do you derive this conviction from? Yeah. Is it because of, FAR was able to drill one well like you mentioned? Did they come out with anything to show that?
That is, FAR's findings were one of the, some of the proofs that we actually have oil. But before FAR, oil, indication of a presence or not of oil starts with the recognition or identification of certain, geological, features. Okay. First and foremost, oil predominantly is found in, sedimentary basins. A sedimentary basin basically is a, geologic feature where sediments have been deposited for millions or in some cases billions of years. It's a sedimentary bed. So if you're looking for oil, first and foremost, you look for a sedimentary basin. When you find a sedimentary basin, you go into looking for the elements of the petroleum system. In the Gambia, elements of the petroleum system, all the elements of the petroleum system have been identified, not only, through geophysical means, but now through geological means. Normally what the elements of the petroleum system does for you is, for petroleum to exist, each of those elements have to exist simultaneously, effectively. Most of them need to be present simultaneously. And you can identify them on seismic data.
So does this have any link with the one we have in Senegal?
Yeah, I was going to come to that.
I had someone said, Senegal is taking our oil.
Okay, I'll come to that. But first and foremost, do we have oil? I'm saying that I strongly believe we have oil because primarily we have all the elements of a petroleum system. Okay. And petroleum, or oil is found where you have, all these elements of petroleum system being present. In addition to that, there is a common principle in exploration, mineral or petroleum exploration, that you look for oil where you find oil. In other words, you look for oil, in situations where oil is known to have, situations under which oil is known to have existed before. You mentioned Senegal, because the same geological processes formed or resulted in the geologic setting in the Gambia and Senegal. If you find oil in the Senegal, there are very good reasons for you to look for oil in the Gambia, with very high chances that you will find it there. Notwithstanding, oil, like most natural resources, the sun, the weather, has certain boundaries, within which there are certain delimitations. You find, certain types of trees or certain types of fish, they are all natural resources, certain types of soil in different parts of a country. If you go to, the beach, the type of sand there is different from this type you will find along the river. So different natural resources are found in different places. What that means is you may still have oil in one location and not another. But the chances are that if the same geological processes that led to the formation of, oil, or the presence of oil in the geologic setting in Senegal were responsible for the formation of the geologic setting in the Gambia, the chances are that oil should be in the Gambia.
You earlier mentioned the issue of course, FAR, BP, and others. This is a country of laws. Could you just take us through the processes of giving them these licenses to start exploration?
Okay. I will start with that of BP because that was highly publicized. Then I will talk about that of FAR because I briefly mentioned that of FAR. The BP one effectively started in 2017, around October, November 2017.
Okay.
And prior to it, what the government did was to seek the support of the African Legal Support Facility, which is a unit or, an element of the ADB. And one of their mandates is basically to support African developing countries, particularly in Africa, with the resources and capacity to, among others, develop the, legal framework for resources, but in our case, provide legal advice in the licensing process. That process started in 2017. The African Legal Support Facilities procured the services of an international law firm called BCLP, or BLP then later became BCLP. BCLP is a huge, legal firm, an international legal firm with hundreds of lawyers all over the world. And they came and assisted the Gambia from 2017 all the way to 2020 with, initiating a very transparent, open licensing round. It's a bidding round, like a tender process for the license. And in that process, what we did is first, we reviewed the licensing regime. The licensing regime basically is a contract agreement that entails the fiscal, the technical, and then the legal, basis for the licensing. They did it in conjunction with a locally established committee called Petroleum Negotiating Committee that comprises of key relevant stakeholder institutions such as the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Justice, the GRA, of course the Petroleum Ministry, the GNPC, and so on. Each of these institutions brought on board the expertise and the sector knowledge and information needed to form the basis for the licensing regime. So, like I said, the process started with a request for information, which was publicized, on including the local media. During which, companies applied or expressed interest, and they were vetted. Those who were found to be, capable or competent enough to execute an exploration program were selected. They were requested to submit a request for proposal based on a very, transparent, well-defined criteria. Once they submitted that, an evaluation of the proposal were made, and then eventually BP was given the license. Yeah, and with respect to FAR, I mentioned that in addition to a licensing round, normally you could have direct negotiations. But with the case of FAR, because already the license was granted to another company, it is a common practice in the petroleum sector that you have companies sharing risk and reward.
Is that normal?
it is totally normal. And how it works is that because investment in petroleum is so high risk and capital intensive, most companies would prefer to get partners to share the risk. What I mean by that is, in exploration, basically what you are trying to do, you are trying to, take a straw. If you are asked, if you are asked, Mr. Cisse, if you are asked to take a straw, blindfolded, and put it in, let's say, a bottle here, that would be what an exploration company is similar to, or an analogy to what an exploration company is trying to do. The risk of you failing to put the straw in that bottle blindfolded is very, very high.
It's high.
Exactly. So that is what exploration companies are tasked themselves to do. They are trying to, out of Gambia's 11,000 square kilometers of offshore area, you want to, drill a hole which is 6 inches, about 6 inches wide.
And they're gambling.
Huge gamblers,
yeah.
But it's highly scientific.
Okay.
It's highly, educated gambling.
Okay.
In other words, you go through a systematic, research that will convince you that where I'm going to drill and find oil. It is very systematic. You start, they are all, like I said, based on scientific principles. It's scientific principles. You know that, if you send sound on the ground, it will be reflected. That is a principle of science. And when it is reflected, it is going to give you information on where it was reflected. That is a principle of science. If it is reflected, you can interpret, it will give you information about where it was reflected from. That information you can rely on because, yeah.
From what you have said, you're telling us that a due process was followed before FAR and BP were granted these licenses.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes.
But why did FAR, after conducting the first exploration, decided to surrender their licenses for the A2 and A5 offshore oil block?
Yeah, again.
And also the same with BP for A1 block.
Yeah, that is a very good question, and I'll be happy to talk at length about it. FAR, as I said, got their licenses in 2017.
Okay.
Once you get the license requires you to come up with a work program and budget on annual basis. No, even before the work program and budget, in the license, there is what is called the minimum work requirement. It is telling you, once you sign that license, you are required to drill a well. It is a broad requirement. But for you to drill a well, you will be required to annually provide work program and budget. The license is structured in such a way that at the end of each period, it is normally structured, the exploration period is structured into 3 periods. First, initial exploration period, first extension exploration period, and then second extension exploration period.
What is the initial period?
Initial period is basically the first 2 years in the case of FAR and
BP.
Petronas and even BP. During that period, you are required to do a list of specific activities. It would entail, in the case of FAR, it included, by the end of the initial exploration period, you have to drill 1 exploration well. Once you drill that exploration well, you have the choice of either going or staying. Yeah, if you find oil, generally, like I said, the oil industry is a very international business with common principles applied across jurisdictions. If you look at the Senegalese license framework, if you look at China, if you look at Ghana or Guyana, you would have almost all those licenses would comprise of, an exploration period, development and production period. in each of those exploration period, again, you will have subdivisions of 2 years, some in 3, some 3 or 4 years. Government's interest often is that that period is small because government wants to see the exploration, find out whether we have oil or not. So at the end of the initial exploration period, you are at liberty to surrender the license as long as you have fulfilled all the conditions under the initial exploration period. You are free to go.
So did they left because, I mean, they didn't found any oil or what?
Okay, like I said, with FAR, at the end of the initial exploration period, which was 2018, they drilled the well as required by the license and as further defined in the work program and budget. Because they were so convinced with the results and outcomes of that well, they wanted to go into the first extension. So they went into the first extension. Under the first extension, they drilled another exploration well as required under the, terms of the first extension. When they finished drilling, again, they were very convinced that the potential is there. We are just missing it. We don't know where the oil is, but we believe the oil is there. So they said anyway, no, at the end of the first extension, Petronas, who was their, partner and major contributor towards the financing of the work program and budget, left. Again, like I said, these are very common, happenings in the petroleum sector. It's investment. Investors are like me and you. If you make investment in something that you believe in initially, but you felt at the end of the day, it's not what you expected. It's reasonable for people to, exit such businesses.
So it means they didn't find oil.
Yeah, they didn't find.
Established.
Yeah, that is established.
Wonderful. What about BP? BP also the same thing?
Yeah, I'll come to BP. But importantly, as I said, they were convinced that what they have seen, the reservoirs, the seals, and then the traps, all points to the, high possibility that there is oil.
But ultimately, they didn't
find oil in the 2 wells that they have drilled.
How about BP?
Okay, BP, like I said, in 2019, BP came onto the block in 2019. It's a lot of fanfare, actually, because they paid government $10 million just to come onto the block. Okay. That shows how, strong their conviction was to the project. But
just like you are convinced.
I am very convinced, okay. And as I said, I'm not alone with that mindset. The industry still thinks there is oil in the Gambia. Okay. If you, base it on the engagements that we are currently having and engagements that we've been having with, industry players, experts, and explorers, you would, you will be convinced that there is oil. But first and foremost, I said it, the main reason is our own, conclusions on the presence of the petroleum system based on the data that we have. Okay. So everything else just reinforces our belief that there is oil.
And so what now happens to the other blocks? A3, A4 and others?
Yeah.
What happens to them? BP left, FAR left?
Yeah. First, so I would say why BP left, and then I will talk about the other blocks. Yeah. FAR was on A2, A5. BP was on A1, and actually wanted the other block when they came into the country, which was the A4 blocks. BP came in 2019. 2020, we all know what happened. COVID struck. When COVID struck, basically, the industry, the petroleum industry, I think was one of the most seriously affected because the petroleum industry depends a lot on, petroleum is used a lot in the aviation, transportation and so on. It came to, basically those industries came to a standstill. And around the same time, there was a very significant, conversations around this energy transition. In 2020, BP happened to have a CEO, Looney, who came up with a different vision for the company. And his vision included, drifting or shifting away from fossil fuels. So basically what he said was, we want to end or exit all countries where we haven't had both fit into, where we are just simply, at the exploration stage.
And so what happens to A1, A4?
Yeah, so BP was on A1. Yeah. So BP in 2021 informed government that they were going to exit.
Good. VAD gone, BP gone. So what happens to blocks A3, A4?
A4? Yeah, the Gambia's offshore jurisdiction, the waters and the subsurface, subsea, is divided into 8 blocks. Okay. Blocks are basically, divisions for exploration purposes. Yeah, we call them plots for residential purposes, blocks for exploration purposes. So the whole offshore area is divided into 8 blocks. It's A1 to A6. Then you have recently we demarcated ultra deep and ultra deep 0 and ultra deep 1. So FAR was on A2, A5. BP was on A1. Then on A4 there is still Petrono. Okay. Petrono basically is a company that came after the arbitration, you may be aware, exactly, African Petroleum arbitration with government.
Which ruled in favor of the company?
No, it was never ruled in favor of, a ruling was never reached.
Okay.
So basically what happened is government, they have many times approached government to have a negotiated settlement and bring the case out of court. In 2020, government decided to accept their request to negotiate and settle it out of court. When we negotiated and settled out of court, as part of that, the negotiations, they were granted, reissued with the A4 block.
Okay. As a commission, what is your biggest regulatory challenges that you're facing today?
Of course, capacity would be one issue. Capacity, because, the petroleum sector is, highly skill-driven industry. The technology is very, is very high. The technology is highest, level technology. You also have, it's highly specialized area. Because, for example, the geosciences are a major, or geoscientists are a major, expertise required, for the, investigations, exploration, and even during the development period. And of course, we have very few geoscientists in the Gambia, and it takes time to get people, through the geoscience programs. We don't have, in the Gambia, for example, at the university, we don't have programs in geosciences. So capacity and other forms of resources are a major constraint. Because in most countries, including some of the highest developing, most developed countries, in areas like exploration, they will still, engage the services of, consultants and specialists, including the lawyers, financial analysis, geoscience, and so on and so forth.
So as we speak, are there any legal reforms, in the pipeline?
Oh,
so you're able to strengthen that petroleum governance?
Yeah, very good work is being done from 2019 as part of the African Legal Support Facility. A comprehensive review of the legislative framework for the petroleum sector was conducted by a consortium of experts, including legal, financial, geoscientists. They came up with recommendations on the broad legislative framework. When I say broad, the broader legislative framework, when I say that, what I mean is you have the fiscal regime. There is a component of the fiscal regime that is dedicated to the petroleum sector. So they look at that and see how modern, how much aligned it is with the government's policies that have been incorporated in the licenses. Because during the licensing, one of the things that have been done is basically understand what government wants, what government's expectations are, draft them in the license. Some of those need to be in other legislations, or some of them at variance or contradictory to some legislation. So what the LSF study did was to look at all those legislations that overlap with the petroleum sector, and then analyzed them, came up with recommendations for amendments, sometimes alignments with so that was in 2020, 2021. Now what we are doing as we speak, we are working with the IMF through the Ministry of Finance to basically implement the recommendations, and of course with the advice and expertise of the IMF also incorporated into the recommendations. So
what are your long-term plans? As a commission, like I said, it was enacted in 2021 by the president, and relatively new.
Yeah.
But what are your long-term plans?
Yeah, very clear with our long-term plans to develop an institution that will form, among other institutions, the bedrock for the development of our petroleum resources. What that means is we will form we are an institution that will help other institutions or work with other institutions to know, how the petroleum sector interacts with their sectors. The capacities that they need in their sectors to help, the Petroleum Commission achieve its mandate, but also create, in addition to that capacity, create a robust legislative framework that is needed for the proper governance of petroleum resources. You and I know, how resources such as petroleum had been a cost to many countries. Yeah. Some of the reasons or factors responsible for that is the lack of proper institutional and legislative framework, knowledge framework, and systems in place. So first, we build our own capacity as an institution. Transmit or share those capacity and understanding with other government institutions, work with them to build the right legislative framework or the necessary legislative framework for the proper governance of the petroleum sector. That's our long term. So that when the resources are found, these resources are found, there would have been laid down rules as to, how they should be utilized among other, things.
As a commission, how do you ensure that the commission is independent, devoid of any political influence?
Yeah, thanks. We've been very lucky from inception that we have, the support of our ministry and the executive in general. And I believe due to, the work that we have done, they trusted us to, operate independently. They trusted and allowed us to operate independently throughout our existence. But importantly also, we have a very strong board. Okay. We have a very strong board with, wide range of expertise in various, competencies, such as law. I don't know if you know this, Mr. Pa Idifal.
Yeah.
Pa Idifal is the chairman of the board of directors of the Petroleum Commission. Okay. Within the same commission, we also have, we have a lawyer, we have an environmentalist, we have a geoscientist, and then, policy background, expert.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you're talking about, your plans and all those things, but with maybe in the next 2 years, what do you think should be the priority of the commission?
Yeah, in the next 2 years, we hope to be, drilling another well.
Okay.
Yeah, we hope to be drilling another well because we work very, systematically in the process of, finding oil.
Okay.
Over the past 1 year, we have, entertained and welcomed four companies into the country. Okay. They came here, they held data room with us. Okay. What that entails is basically they'll come and have a look and review of the Gambian opportunities that we have. And as we speak now, 2 or 3 of those companies have made a decision to go from technical evaluation to economic evaluation. So once that is completed, we hope to have engagements that will lead to the allocation of licenses. Once licenses are given or granted, okay, we work with them through the exploration, initial exploration period, at the end of which, hopefully, we will get another well drilled. Okay. So if we drill another well, hopefully this time we'll find oil. Okay. And everybody's question would be answered. Do we have oil? Hopefully we should be able to answer it in the coming years.
Interesting. I'm told we're out of time, but just your final message to the viewers and Gambians regarding the work of the commission and,
Yeah, the commission is, as you said, is relatively new, but not very new. It's still an old institution, as I said, had been in existence. Yeah. But in its current structure, it's relatively new, but with very good internal arrangements, highly organized, very with good capacity in respective areas of such as geoscience. We have geoscience division, we have the finance, we have the audit, of course, we have the corporate. It's highly organized. Our intention, and we have, as we speak, we've spent a lot of efforts in developing working tools. Okay. Yeah, so that work of the commission is not arbitrary. In order to have that, we have clearly defined policies, including, operational tools such as license monitoring, program monitoring, I would say, license management, toolkits that are used to govern, to ensure that government's interests in the licenses are protected. And like I said, our vision and our efforts continue to be, interacting with government institutions to ensure that, an understanding and common one for that matter about their role in the petroleum sector is attained. And then their policy advice is taken on board in designing the policies for the petroleum sector.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jere Barrow, Director General of the Petroleum Commission. It was good to have you on the State of Affairs program. We thank you so much for coming and for helping us better understand what the Commission has been doing and the status of our petroleum prospects. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the program. Quite appreciated.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Cisse. And I would have actually loved very much to talk about the Senegalese element.
In 30 seconds, we're out of time. In 30 seconds.
Basically, for you to share resources that are at a border, you need to confirm that those resources exist on your side of the border. Okay. Efforts the drilling of 2 wells where objectives were to, among others, confirm whether, we have oil around that end.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we haven't yet found oil, around the border with Senegal.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Barrow, for making us better understand, as far as the work of the Commission is concerned. Well, viewers, with that, we bring an end to this week's edition of your weekly State of Affairs program. I was your host, Aliu Ceesay. Do join us next week. Until then, bye-bye from me and the entire production team. You can also watch this broadcast by visiting our YouTube channel, QTV Gambia. Thank you.